it looks like it's now recording. Well, make it out of this one. I'm gonna go back here. And make this over. Make this not big. I don't want that big. I want this small. Sorry. And we still are having folks join us anyway. I think my screen sharing stopped. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is there. Okay. All right. Now, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Sorry, got choked. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for joining. I'm going to try and keep tabs on the chat feature as well as letting people in. So if I get a little bit distracted, that's why, because I'm trying to manage all of that. But this is the bidders conference for the Safe Place funds for 2022 to 2024. I do want to say that we have a contract with DCS that runs through 25 now. No, I don't know, 2 years. There's a gap. And so I want to be clear that this funding is dependent upon that continued contract through IYSA or through the DCS. So just want to make sure that everybody is clear on that, that's going to be listed different places in the RFP. It certainly is listed in the contract, the award letters as we do all of those things, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there first. All right, so what we are going to cover, and we have some folks who have had Safe Place for a while. We also have folks on here who are interested in starting a new Safe Place program. Those agencies are eligible as long as they have a letter of intent into NSP. We'll talk about that and can launch fairly quickly, but we'll go over that. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time, probably more time than I did the last time we did this, just on the implementation pieces of this. And I've also spent some time highlighting the areas that I know consistently people lose points on in their proposals so that you guys have that additional information. So we'll do an introduction with the overview of the timeline. We'll talk specifically about the Safe Place components and how we got here. And then we're going to look in detail at the application, the different parts of the application, in addition to our service standards and outcomes, because those are both very closely related to the RFP. A little bit of the budget and how this all gets scored, and then you guys will have time for questions at the end. Having said that, I will say that if you have questions throughout this process, please feel free to unmute and ask that question when you have it, when it occurs to you, so that you don't lose it. And I think that probably will be helpful for everyone else as well. All right. So for those who are unfamiliar with this, Safe Place was introduced into the state budget for Indiana probably back in the late 80s, early 90s. Indiana is the only state that has Safe Place in its budget. It is a pitiful, okay, in my opinion, a pitiful amount. I want to make sure that say that in my opinion, it is not funded at the level that it should be funded. It is $112,000 a year. We have currently 17 or 18 active Safe Place agencies that cover 29 counties in the state of Indiana. And so our hope would be that we will see an increase in that so that we can expand those programs and support you more. So it is DC, it does come out of the DCS line, DCS budget for the state. We work with a wonderful DCS prevention person who's kind of our liaison. She really understands and I think values the program. So I think we have a really strong advocate for that, but we are going to talk about this with the assumption that we have $112,000 and with the hope that we will see that increase. So just so you know. IYSA administers this fund as we administer the Youth Service Bureau Fund as well. And so all of the whole process goes through Indiana Youth Service Association. We also, IYSA works very, very closely with National Safe Place Network. And so these are NSP approved Safe Place programs. You do have to go through National Safe Place to turn in an application, your letter of intent in order to get a NSP license from Safe Place. We do help with that process. And in fact, IYSA is the only state association that has our own license agreement with NSP, and that is to provide the support to the current programs and those expansion efforts. So you guys get the benefit of that because I do all of the legwork for support, not all, but a lot at most of the legwork for support and expansion efforts in the state of Indiana. And as a result, you guys get a 20% discount in your license fee. That goes through IYSA. So this is going to apply. The RFP you guys are eligible if you are a current licensed agency. And I will say right now, find that license because you'll have to turn that in with your RFP. And sometimes that takes a little bit of work to find that. You might have to contact them to get a copy of it. So ask now because it may take a bit to get that. So if you can't put your hands on your NSP license, then please go ahead and start the work to get that from them. If you are a new program and you do not have you don't currently have a license, then what's going to be required is your letter of intent that you submit to NSP that really spells out how you're going to run this program. Again, I typically work very closely with those agencies that want to start a new program to do so. And would be happy to do that out because that's my normal role outside of the RFP process. What is new for this particular grant proposal this year is a scoring cutoff. And so applicant qualifications required that the applications for current programs get a score of 70, at least 70 out of 100. And new programs get a score of at least 56 out of 80. And so that 70, it is basically because this is not a lot of money, we want to make sure that that money is going to qualified programs who can demonstrate that they have what they need to run the program. Any questions about this?
How do we know our score from last time?
You ask, hey, you send me an email and say, Robin, I would like to get our score and our feedback from the last RFP. And I will work to get that to you. Yeah, so that's just an email to me. Good question, Cameron. As we go through this, the stuff that's going to show up in the black will be new things for this year. The things that show up in red are going to be those that I've kind of pulled out and targeted because they have been those items that are scored low on. Okay. So if you guys have specific questions about license and how to get those or letter of intents or whatever, please go ahead and email me separately so that we can, I don't forget to ask that because a lot of times I lose the chat questions. And so you just email me directly if you have specific questions around those.
Hey, Robin.
Yeah, Steve.
It's Steve. What's the definition of a new program versus a current program?
So you are a current program because you are operating. And so a new program is going to be someone who is not currently operating and implementing Safe Place, but wants to start. Okay. All right. So this is our timeline. You guys will have until the 10th, which is Friday, to submit any questions that you have around the RFP. That RFP did go out. So that document, you guys have that document. It went out on the 3rd of September, which was Monday. So if you didn't get that and you want that, email me today. I will make sure that you get it. If you don't have a copy of the RFP, I made sure that all of our current agencies were on. I made sure that anyone that I was talking to regarding expansion was on that list. But again, if you need it, let me know so that you have that. You can look that over. And those specific questions about the application can be submitted directly to me via email. rdonaldson@ndsb.org. I'm going to actually, most of you guys have that, but I'm going to put it into the chat feature for everyone. rdonaldson@indysb.org. It's like my fingers do that automatically. It's like, don't even have to think about it. All right. So you have that. I will answer those. In fact, typically what I do is I will pull the most frequently asked questions from the last application cycle. I will add any new questions to that. And then we post that on the IYSA website. So that will be up by the 17th, which basically means I have until the 16th to get my answers done and then get it to our website vendor, because he usually needs about a day or so to get that up. That doesn't mean that you can't ask questions afterwards. It's just easier to do it before, because I don't have to continue to modify the frequently asked questions. This grant application is due on October 22nd. That is a Friday. So you guys will have about 6 weeks or so to get this written. If you get it in early, that's fabulous, because what I do is once those are in and I have made sure that everything is there, then I go ahead and send it on to your review team. It just makes it easier. If I get them, then I just go ahead and send them to all the reviewers will have every application that they are reviewing by the 22nd. I have all 15 of my reviewers recruited. They all have read grants for me before. So we have experienced reviewers. And that means that every team will read, every proposal is going to be read by at least 3 reviewers, so that you guys know that. And I think each review team will have anywhere from 3 to 4 to read. So they have a couple weeks to do that and get me the scores. If there is a huge discrepancy in scores on any application, and huge means 10 or more points, that typically means that I've got a really, really easy reviewer or I have a really, really hard reviewer, or somebody missed something. And so we have those team calls the week after that to talk about those discrepancies so that they match a little bit better. I want to make sure that, sometimes I typically don't ask people back if they're really, really easy and everybody gets 100, because sometimes you do deserve 100, but if everybody gets 100, then I have some questions. And then, or if they're being really, really hard. So we want to make sure that everybody has a fair chance. I did change the cover page on the RFP. So if I emailed that out or you pulled it off of the website before noon yesterday, the cover page on the RFP says the grant is due the 29th. That is incorrect. It is the 22nd. I did change that and send that back to our website person so that he could get the correct date, the one with the correct date up there. It is due on the 22nd. So I want to be clear about that. And I will I'll probably send out an email too, I just want to make sure everybody knows that because I don't think we have everyone on the call. After I get the scores back and we've had the review team calls, if we need them, then I will basically figure out what your final score is, what your funding recommendation is going to be based upon that score, and then I get those to
Yeah.
DCS.
Yeah, it's live, but I'm on mute.
All
I
right.
don't have my camera up.
Following your license every.
Yeah,
All right. So Nikki, I'm going to ask you to mute Nikki from Cass County, to mute yourself because we
I
can.
must not be muted. I
No.
frozen. Not muted. I'm frozen. Yeah,
Let's see if I can't mute her either. Oh, well.
Okay.
All right,
Check.
I can't do it.
there we go. All right. So again, just kind of go over the funding basics. This funding period is for July 1, 2022. It will run through June 30th, 2024. It is dependent upon continued DCS funding because we do have a gap there. If the funding remains the same, if it remains at its current level, and we have about the same number of applicants apply and who meet that cutoff score, then we anticipate the funding range being anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000. If we get an increase, that will change. Maybe we fund at this and then there's an increase that comes later on. All of those funding changes will be based upon the score that you guys get based upon this RFP process. But right now we're anticipating this range, 5,000 to 7,500. Again, you have to be a licensed agency or have submitted your letter of intent for those of you who are wanting to launch a safe place. So that has to be included in your RFP. And just, you know, some of the same kind of things that we require through our grant or contract is you have to be an equal opportunity employer. So you have to be compliant there, assuring confidentiality standards. And we'll talk about how you do that in the grant later on. You do have to be up to date in your reporting. So if you guys are a current agency and you are behind in your reporting and you want to apply, I strongly suggest that you get that reporting caught up. Because that's going to be, you do have to have that reporting in place. And then just kind of, again, meet all the guidelines, all of the applicable laws for employment, HR, and our service standards. And when you send in your application, I am the first one to look at it, not to read it, but to make sure that all of those pieces are there. So let's say you submit this application and you forget to include your licensing agreement or your letter of intent, and it's before the due date, I'm going to send it back to you and say, hey, I need this, which is another reason why it's really, really helpful to submit this prior to the due date. Because if you submit it at 5 o'clock on the due date and something's missing, it will not get because then I have the time to ask you to resubmit something. So please make sure that it is complete. If you can at all possible, submit it early so that we have time to make sure that you have everything that you need there. Okay, any questions about that stuff before I move on? Okay. So we're going to talk about what the service standards are for Safe Place. These are DCS service standards that were created in conjunction with National Safe Place. They very closely, in fact, they mirror the National Safe Place implementation standards. I was actually on staff at NSP when this was done, which is kind of cool. So we're going to talk about these a little bit more in detail so that you have an understanding of exactly what we're looking for, because you will have to talk about in your RFP how you're meeting these 4 components. And it be pretty clear to our reviewers that you have the capacity to do this stuff. So when we talk about crisis intervention, we are talking about staff people who are available 24/7 to respond to those safe place sites, to respond to those calls, and to be able to go out and, if necessary, meet with a young person. So that 24/7 call could be a landline at a shelter or one of your residential partners. It could be a cell phone that someone is going to answer, but it needs to be a live person who's answering a call 24/7. So you'll talk about who that is. You'll talk about, how the response is going to happen. Is it, if it goes to, let's say, a partner, and I know some of you guys have partners for residential services, how are they going to get the information to the person who's going to respond? Because typically they may not be that person. They may be the residential component, but and because they're residential, they're the 24-hour number, but they're going to have to call somebody else to go out and meet with that young person. So you're going to talk about, what that response is. Most of you guys and most of our Safe Place agencies across the country now use staff. We still have a few who use trained volunteers, but not very many. But talk about, who's going to go out, meet with that young person, do that crisis intervention with them. And then if they need residential, what that residential piece is going to be, as well as how you're going to follow up. So if you have an emergency use shelter, then this is easy, because typically your staff is doing all of these things. But if you're a partner with someone, then that you have more moving pieces, and you need to make sure that you're explaining those moving pieces in an order and clear enough for your reviewers to know how this is going to work. So all of these pieces have to be in place. The 24-hour number, the response piece, that crisis intervention, who's going to go out, the residential component, and then kind of that follow-up assessment piece, the appropriate community resources. So that's that crisis intervention. Community education is about increasing awareness of Safe Place. Safe Place doesn't work unless kids know about the program and are comfortable using the program. And the way that happens is through these community education efforts. And so this can be going out and talking to the kids at schools, talking to them at Boys and Girls Clubs or sports events, or in your own programs. At community events. It's just being able to get to those kids to tell them about the program. When I was at NSP, we would get calls from agencies who were considering dropping the program because nobody used it. And then we would go look at community education numbers, and they were low. They weren't talking to the kids. Of course, kids aren't going to use it if you're not talking to them. So this is a huge component of that Safe Place program. And you guys know, who have been doing this for a while, you're the Safe Place person. You're the face of this program in the community, and kids get comfortable with you, and that increases their likelihood of using the program as well. So NSP implementation guidelines are that community education is done and reaches at least 25% of the youth in your targeted age group. For most of us, that targeted age group is between 10 and 18. These are the numbers that so this is the age range that I use, and I get these numbers from the Kids Count data, because it will break this down, which is super nice. So let me go back here. Look at the Kids Count data. And for most of the current agencies, I have those numbers. So I can share that again with you. I share this at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, really when you're starting to do your outreach goals for NSP, because they ask those. So I have all of those numbers. If you're a new program and want those numbers, and then let me know. It's really easy to do, but we'll make sure that you are trying to reach that 25% of target population. And this includes in-person, but it also includes, we have some, National Safe Place has some videos that you can make available to schools. And a lot of times schools will run those over their television systems, at the beginning of homeroom. And then they give you the count for all of the kids who were there that day, that those count in your outreach numbers as well. With COVID, we have had to be very, very creative in terms of video presentations and virtual presentations. So all of those count in your outreach numbers as well. We'll talk a little bit more, but community education also includes adults. So your target population is young people, but we also want to talk to adults so that they understand, especially for those adults who work in youth services or have contact with kids and potentially could make this referral. All right, the third component is site recruitment and maintenance. And so, part of this program that makes it work is this public-private partnership with businesses, with governmental entities, other nonprofits that will hang that yellow and black sign. And kids have access to immediate safety and resources. I mean, that's kind of the core component of this program, is that you have a place for kids to go, no matter where they are in the community, where they can access these resources. So that means that whoever is hanging that site, whether it's fire stations, whether it's your local McDonald's or convenience store, that they meet all of the requirements for what it means to be a safe place site, that they have, 2 people on, that those folks are trained, that if a young person goes in, they know how to respond. They have all of the materials, which is our procedure sheet up there. And all of this stuff we check every year, at least once a year, to make sure that they are ready to respond, they can respond appropriately, they have all the materials that they need, and that we have that geographic coverage. So you'll talk about this, how you do the training, and for the current agencies, we're going to talk about, those site checks, because that's part of it. The last part is program evaluation. Program evaluation is reporting. It's doing the youth evaluations if kids come into the program. It's doing the pre-post surveys if you go out and do presentations. It is making sure that you not only are doing your site checks, but you're putting that into the National Safe Place database. You're collecting all of this stuff. The NSP database has a place to enter this. It has reports that we run. It will have, and I will be running these reports to look at your outcomes. And so you want to make sure that if you have, let's say you have sites, but they're not in the database for your current programs, that you get those in there, because I'm going to start looking at this stuff. And you want to make sure that those are in there. You want to be up to date in your reporting. So we are required to do a monthly report. It's due the 15th of the following month. So you want to make sure your reports are up there. That if you do youth evaluations and you served youth, that you have that information in there. One change that we made, and this was based upon changes to the NSP implementation, is that your pre-post used to be 10% of, or 20% of all your youth participating. NSP changed that to at least 250 annually. So it's 20% or 250 annually, whichever is the least. Usually 250 annually is the least. And so that you have, at least those. Now, this year is going to be a little bit different because, we have to make concessions for COVID. And so I will be, taking that into account, but these are the normal expectations, NSP implementation standards. All right. Any questions about the components? Again, all of these are going to be in the RFP under the service standards.
Robin, I had a quick question just about this pre and post. I know it's always been difficult. If we're only able to get the pre's, does that at least count?
No. I mean, because it's a comparison.
Right.
So who's asking this question? Because I can't
Me,
see.
Vanessa.
Oh, I'm sorry, Vanessa.
No, you're good.
Okay, this is not, I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. This is the youth outreach safe place outreach presentation pre-post. Okay. So hopefully when you're doing this, they'll do the before, and then before you leave, you do the post and you capture that. If you're leaving it with teachers, then you're leaving them with a manila envelope that they can just collect that from the kids and mail back to you. You have to have the pre-post because otherwise there's nothing to compare it to.
Right. The measuring that outcome is difficult with just the one. I just know so much of our outreach has had to be like community based and at events, and that's impossible to do a pre and post when you're running a community booth because we're not allowed in the schools right now. So shy of our shelter presentations, we don't have actually direct contact with a lot of kiddos.
Right. And and I'll talk about the outcome scoring for our current programs. All of that stuff is in consideration.
Okay.
We're not going to get hurt based upon that.
Okay.
I mean, outreach was basically impossible with COVID. Or at least the standard practices for outreach were impossible.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Then we'll move on to the eligibility requirements, and you will see that some of these are, repetitive. We've already talked about this. I will tell you, and I will tell the reviewers that it is completely okay for you to say, refer to this section in the RFP where we talk about 24-hour access, because you're going to talk about 24-hour access in the crisis intervention component. The eligibility requirements are going to ask about it again. It's okay for you to say this was explained in the crisis intervention component on page 6, whatever it was. So that's okay. If you explained how the intervention counseling was going to the crisis intervention was going to take place, if you've explained how the home placements options were going to take place in your crisis intervention, you can say, refer to page whatever to find the answers to this. You don't have to repeat it. And I stress that with the reviewers as well, as long as you make it clear where they're going to find it. So, when you guys get this, and my recommendation is to follow the headings the way that they are set out in the RFP, to make sure that you have those headings, so it's going to be program provider narrative 1A, and that you have that, and then you answer those questions. So for the eligibility piece, it's going to be in the service narrative, and it's going to be to whatever, then you can refer to, the service narrative 1A, because that's the question that answered the crisis intervention. So you just want to make it clear. A tip for writing grants, and this is what I do, is I will take the RFP and I just copy the whole thing, and then I answer the questions, and I typically will bold one, and then I just answer the questions. And then when I'm done, and I have someone read that first before I turn it in, and then when that's read and someone else feels like that those answers meet the question, or the answers actually really explain the question, then I'll take the content question piece, but I leave those headings in. That is helpful. I will tell you that from a reviewer standpoint, people are much more, I guess, I don't know if lenient's the right word, but when you have this organized very well, and they don't have to go searching for stuff, then they typically tend to score better. They just do. So the information, and I will tell them if the information is there, even though it was hard to find, you have to give them the points, but don't make them go look for it. It's just easier for you. It's easier for them if they don't have to do that. The other part of this eligibility requirement that you will have already answered is this outreach section. So again, you can say, refer to service narrative, service delivery plan 1B, or whatever it is. That is all going to be outlined, but tell them where it is. You don't have to answer it again, but tell them where it is. Things that are going to be different, that are not going to be in those 4 components that you will have to make sure that you answer and explain are going to be how you maintain confidentiality for the youth that you serve. So you'll want to talk specifically about, you know, password protected if it's internet, if it's hard copies, locked files, and, you know, in locked rooms, that they have to, you know, people, you have to have a confidentiality, release of information to share, all of that kind of stuff. You want to talk about that. You want to talk about how your staff are trained. And that can, and you can refer to the quarterly meetings that they go to, because we, you know, at IYSA, because we do that training, other trainings that they participate in, but you want to make sure that you, and I would say emphasize the evidence-based training. So things like motivational interviewing, and if you guys are using evidence-based assessments, you know, trauma-informed, all that stuff. Your match fund, here you can refer to the line item budget that you're going to submit, as long as it's there. And a DCS requirement is that you are matching your award by 100%. So if you get $7,000, you need to show in your budget how you as an agency are spending an additional $7,000 outside of this fund on the program. But you can, and I'll talk about that more, but you can say in this piece, refer to the budget. The last is data collection. This is also probably, you're going to talk a little bit about data collection in the service narrative evaluation part. So there's only a couple of these that you really have to kind of spell out. The rest of them you can kind of say, find it here, because you're already talking about it. But these are a part of the DCS Safe Place Service Standards, so they have to be addressed in the RFP. All right. So these are our outcomes. Again, these are part of the service standards. If you guys have any other programming through DCS, you know that you have outcomes that are typically outlined. So these were developed again in conjunction with DCS and National Safe Place when I was at NSP. They have been modified to, we've updated them. We've made them more reflective of how the program actually works since then. For current agency, you guys are doing reports on these twice a year to kind of talk about progress. So this should not be, you know, this should be very familiar. You should know what this is. For any new programs, I think it's really helpful for you to understand what an effective program looks like and how we are, you know, what the expected measurements are. And so this gives you, it's broken down into those 4 components: crisis intervention, outreach, safe, the sites, and the program evaluation. And so for crisis intervention, we're making sure that kids have immediate access and that they report that they were being helped. This data is collected on the NSP Youth Evaluation Report. So you have, this is all data that you are already entering into the National Safe Place database that you should be already entering in the NSP database. And so again, we haven't really, we being IYSA, haven't really required any additional things. We've looked at the implementation standards to come up with these outcomes. That you are making a difference. This is, you know, that positive impact. So they're actually reporting this on the youth evaluation, and the fact that they would use the program. This is from your pre-post survey report. You guys will have a chance to talk about your progress on these goals. And I would say if there has been difficulty reaching these goals because of COVID, that you're very, very specific about stating that. it's pretty hard to get your pre-post data when you can't go out, pre-post outreach data when you can't go do outreach. So, and again, I'm going to emphasize this with the reviewers is that we have to be realistic about what these expectations are. And some of the stuff we just couldn't do. I know that. But it's helpful to kind of, again, know what the measurements are. We have outreach. And so what is really, really important is that your outreach goal is 25% of that target population. So if you are unsure, ask me what your target goal is. Go on, look on your NSP agency page, because that's where you're putting that outreach goal, and make sure that those numbers match, because you get points for those numbers matching, right? And so that you're having that target population. Typically you guys do really, really well meeting this goal, so COVID just whatever screwed everything up. If you met it in 19, talk about it in 19, and that's going to be helpful. So, you can look at this stuff either on a calendar year, because that's how NSP looks at it, or you can look at it on the fiscal year from July to June, because that's how the funding is based. And as long as you're meeting the goal in one of those ways, then that's going to be okay. Calendar or fiscal. If not, and it's because of COVID, explain what the difficulty was. This 10% increase is the pre-post. Again, even when COVID wasn't around, a lot of times that 10% increase was difficult to show because kids already knew how to receive help, because you have established programs where you've done all of this outreach. And so that, again, that's why it says as the data allows in there. I am the one who looks at these outcomes and calculates the score for the outcome progress. So you won't have to worry about the reviewers not understanding and you not getting the points for the progress toward your outcomes, because I'm the one who's doing that. We will look at volunteers or donors. This is either the volunteer report. There's also a site contribution report that you can use. So if you've got contributions, and that includes in-kind contributions that you have not reported in the database, then you can do that. Let's say it is a Safe Place site, and maybe it's a Kroger, and they donated drinks or cookies or whatever for an outreach event, or maybe it's a pizza place, and on every first Friday of the month, they give free pizza to your shelter or to one of your agency programs. That counts. It doesn't have to be to your program specific. It just has to be because there was a relationship because of Safe Place. So you want to make sure that you're reporting that. And if you guys, I have a recorded webinar that explains how to use the NSP database to do this reporting and to do the kind of the progress report. So if you need that, let me know. Just email me. Again, this is going to be for current programs. For new programs, you guys don't have any of this data, and those points don't count. So these are the points that don't count for new programs. Adults so we have adults. I did change this to 19 is the baseline, but again, we're not doing outreach, so that's probably.
Hey, Robin.
Yeah.
I was wondering, so the site contribution or the volunteer contribution part of that, does it have to be a Safe Place site? We do have a lot of funds that come into our civic support. Okay, well then we have a number reporting for that, so we will report more to that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a Safe Place site. It is someone who is contributing to your agency because of outreach, Safe Place outreach efforts. They've learned about, so maybe it's a school, maybe it's a service provider, a service club, whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So we raise quite a bit at our fundraiser called Sip and Support. So we can just record how much was given from to the Safe Place, as long as it's going to the Safe Place program?
It doesn't have, no, it doesn't necessarily have to go to the Safe Place program. Your event is targeted around Safe Place. I mean, that's kind of what, to support that program. But like I said, if it's, you know, someone donated this to support just your agency in general, that still counts. Because they got there because it's the sip and serve, or sip and whatever, sip and what?
Yeah.
Sip and serve, yeah.
Support.
Support, okay. So they got there, and because of this, that's targeted around Safe Place, but they made a contribution to the general agency, that still counts.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I know you guys are getting support that you're not counting, and that's why I want to be clear. And if you have questions, just ask. It's like, okay, so I got this, does this really count? And I'll tell you yes or no. All right. So for sites, so I want to tell you, this is probably one that I will definitely look at, and you guys will get points for, because site recruitment and maintenance, some of that work you were able to continue. I don't know that I'll look at 100%, because I know that you guys had sites that actually closed down when we were shut down. They weren't even open. But we've been open enough now that I think that this probably, you guys should have this stuff. So I'm going to look that you're doing your Safe Place sites, that they're in the database. They have to be in the database. That's the only way I know. That's the only way I know. So make sure they're in there. Everything is either in compliance, or you have arranged that you're going to go back and give them that stuff. So, you know, maybe you had a site that lost the procedure sheet and you knew that, so they're not going to be in compliance on that, but you're taking it back, then you can go in and change that. So you just make sure all of those changes have occurred and that the employees know what they're supposed to do, even if that's just go get the manager. At least they know that they're going to go get someone who knows what the Safe Place procedure is, or they know to go and read that procedure sheet. You know, really what we want is we want to know that kids are going to be responded to appropriately when someone walks in that site. So that's that piece. And for you, for you guys who are new programs, I think that this is helpful to sit through, because you get an idea of what implementation really kind of looks like for Safe Place. All right. Also for sites, so we're going to look at the, you guys can provide a map and that's usually the easiest way, or refer to the map. We're going to look at the youth evaluations and make sure that the kids are saying that they could find it easily, that they were welcomed and they felt respected when they walked in. That's kind of important. And here's that, that agency contribution piece, or the site contribution piece, that they're supporting, because, with cell phones, and especially for established programs, kids aren't always using sites. They're calling you directly, they're coming to your agency directly. And so it's important that sites feel that they can contribute and are meaningful in other ways. All right, the last part is this program evaluation. Again, we're going to look at timely submissions of reports, including your pre-post, your site checks, looking at meeting your NSP goals, a 90% success rate. So doesn't even have to be 100%. And those are those outreach goals that you set for National Safe Place. And then the site, or the program review. And again, COVID just kind of messed that up. And so I'm the one doing the scoring on this. I'll take care of all of that. You guys are not going to get dinged because I didn't get to your agency to do the program review this year. That would not be unfair. That would not be fair. So I'm not going to do that. All right. Questions about outcomes? And speaking of outcomes, y'all owe me a report if you're a current agency, and I don't already have it. All right, then let's move on to the actual RFP. So there are a number of attachments. I referred to the service standards a number of times. So that's going to be the first thing that you see. And then we're going to go through some of these. We won't go through all of them. But I do want to point out that this is an electronic application. You guys are going to be submitting this to me electronically. And everything has to be in one document. So you're going to write it, you're going to find your license, you're maybe, put a map in there, whatever you print your Google, take a screenshot of your Google map, print it off for your Safe Place sites, and you scan it all as a single document. Because if you scan it to me and there's more than one document, I'm going to send it right back to you. I can't send it to the reviewers that way. That's the problem. So it needs to be a single document. This is an electronic submission. There are a couple of places where you're supposed to sign in blue ink. So if you don't have a color scanner, then you can scan me the black copy and mail the blue copies in to the office and just tell me that that's what you're doing. But hopefully you have a color scanner and that's all going to show up. But this does have to be submitted electronically because that's the way that I get it to the reviewers. We're going to talk in more detail about the provider and service narrative. I'll talk a little bit about the budget, the logic model. We've already talked about the outcomes, and then you have all of these different things. I do have a couple of slides that show you what the scoring tool looks like. And I want you guys to know that I do this. So I train the reviewers. We go over all of the same things, stuff that I go over with you. I pretty much don't really change this. I just call it something different, this PowerPoint, which of course you guys can, I'll make sure that you get a copy of the recorded link so that you can have that to refer back to. But you need to have all of this stuff in here. And so just make sure that and there's a checklist in RFP to make sure that you have that. All right. So talk a little bit about scoring for current agencies. If you're currently implementing Safe Place right now, even if it's a newer program, this is the 100 points that are possible. And 20 of those are those program goals and progress. So says, I know we have at least one agency on here that is running the program, but not currently getting Safe Place money. Those progress goals and reports still do apply to you. And so you want to make sure that, you're looking at that progress report and that you have all of this data in the NSP database. And if you have questions, I have recorded videos for almost everything. So just let me know and I'll send you a recorded video so that you have that guidance. We're going to talk specifically about all of this kind of stuff. So I do want to point out from this slide that if you are a program that serves more than one county, and we have several on here, you do get an additional point for serving those additional counties. It is a way to acknowledge the additional effort that you put in in this program. I wish there was another way to do this. Haven't figured that out yet. So at least now you get at least one additional point. And I have seen that make a difference. We started doing this 2 years ago, I think. I don't think it was 4, but it definitely made a difference in your scoring. Okay, so let's look at, so that's for the current programs. We do have a number of folks on here who are not receiving Safe Place programs. So this is going to apply to you. If you are, well, this is if you are not implementing a program right now, but you want to start one, this applies to you. So I know I have at least 2 folks on here. So this is going to be 80 points. The part that's missing is that progress toward goals. But you're still going to explain all of this stuff in other ways. And we'll talk about that specifically. So your average, so I'll take your scores from your 3 reviewers. You'll get an average score. and then I'll take all of the scores and find out, okay, from all of the proposals, what was the mean score? What was, the average score for everybody? I compare your score to that average score for everyone. And based upon that, that's how you get the funding. So let's say the average score was 95 and you scored a 97, then you're going to get, and I'm not good at math, you're going to get 102%, more of the average. So if I took all of this and I divided it by the number, all of the funds, and I divided it by a number of programs, and let's say that it averaged out to $6,000. I don't know what it averages out to, but if it did, then you're going to get 102% of $6,000. Does that make sense? I did that. It's math. I can show you the math so that you guys see that. But I want to be clear that you understand that your score on this RFP is directly tied to the amount of money that you will get. So it's really important that you get the best score possible. I will also say that in the 8 years that I have been overseeing the RFP processes for Safe Place and YSBs, the grant proposals have improved, the quality of the grant proposals have improved significantly, and the variation has dropped. Everybody's getting better at writing grant proposals. All right, so let's look at, these are the program goals, and these are going to be, I talked about those outcomes. This is where this 20 points comes from. The first is the youth outreach goal, and that is 10 points. It's really divided further into 5 points. If you get 5 points, if your outreach goal is at that 25% of your target population or higher. So just having the appropriate outreach goal will get you 5 points. So look, if you're not sure, ask and change it before I get in the database. Because, and I think most of you are at that, at that 25% of your youth population. That is the expectation. And so you will get points for meeting that expectation. The other part of that is, have you met that outreach goal? This is where you are going to, you have some give, because COVID it decimated our outreach strategies. And I know we've kind of adapted to some of those, but it has messed with almost everybody's outreach goals. And so that will be taken into consideration. The other 10 points are based upon all of those other outcomes that we talked about, your site checks, your contributions, the youth evaluation data, the number of adults that you've reached, all of those other things. I average, so I take it, it's math. It's complicated. It's like, so if you reached 7% of this goal, then you get 7 points, basically, is what that is. And I pull them all together and average it, knowing that I'm going to probably just give you the points for anything that's related to outreach, or just not count them, basically. I'll have to give you the points because it's part of that. So it's just level the playing field for everyone. There are going to be other places in the application that you'll talk about your strategies and the things that you did differently, where that can get you more points than maybe somebody else. But I will, still look at things like your accessibility and coverage and your site checks and how ready how ready your sites are, and, contributions and stuff like that. And then again, this is where that 1 point is added if you have more than one county. This is what it looks like on the scoring tool. You guys have the scoring tool. It is in the RFP, and hopefully you will notice that your instructions match what the scorers or the reviewers are scoring on. So it's, yours says you will demonstrate. The scoring tool says the agency did demonstrate. That's that's the only difference. But I'm going to be looking, and I do this part. so that you guys know, I am the one who completes this part that gives you those 20 points. And the reviewers get that with this filled in. They get their scoring tool with this already filled in. All right. All right, let's look at the provider narrative. So you guys are going to talk about your agency. You should talk about, kind of what you're already doing. I think that it's a lot more detailed in the art. Well, it is more detailed. So like an organizational chart and your partnerships with the other people that you have. You guys, I will say that the past applications typically have done a really good job talking about your partnerships and how you work with others collaboratively to make Safe Place work. I mean, that's kind of the backbone of this program, is that, community collaboration. The one place that agencies typically lose points in the provider narrative is describing past challenges or anticipated challenges. Should be pretty easy for you guys to do this time around, because past challenges are all about COVID, and anticipated challenges could also be about COVID. But this is typically where I see most, if they are losing points in the provider narrative, they're losing it because they're not talking about challenges, or they talk about challenges and then they don't talk about possible solutions. So these are the two places that are typically where people miss and lose points here. What is going to be different this time around, and that's this part here, is that those of you who are currently getting funding should explain the steps that you took to still get information out to kids during COVID. And I know that you did, because we've talked about this in our quarterly meetings. We've had some really, really cool ideas, very innovative and creative ways to get this information to the kids when school was shut down and everybody was locked down. So talk about those, explain what you had, how you had to adjust, because you can't get into the schools. How are you getting that information to those kids? What other new things are you doing?
Hey, Robin and Sheila. Would this be a place to input pretty much anything that you were able to do during time of shutdown? Any accomplishments, such as maybe another site or two that you were able to, establish, or anything on the positive, or is this just for outreach?
No, because this is providing quality services. So it says share Safe Place information, but I would, if you guys did other things, then I would go ahead and put it here too. All right. So, so the scoring, you guys, this is the scoring rubric. I know it's kind of hard to see because the writing is small, but it says, it does say a new outreach strategy is developed. But brag on yourselves, put it there. They're going to say, hey, that's cool. They're going to give you extra points. So yeah, go ahead and put that in there. There will be another place to kind of talk about this stuff too, in the service delivery plan. So, but you can, put it one place and then just say refer back to, or put in both places. So the service narrative is the bulk of your score. It's 40%. I will say the need for services is only 5 points. Do not belabor this. This should not be more than a page length. Your need for services should not be more than 1 page. The need is there. We know the need is there. So talk about things like your abuse rates, your dropout rates. If you've got data on delinquency or arrest rates for kids, you can talk about that. Educational attainment, use kids count data has a lot of that stuff that's going to be really, really good. I tell the reviewers about kids count. They can pull that up. They can see what's available. So, if it says provide the abuse numbers and you don't provide the abuse numbers and they see that the abuse numbers are kids count, you're going to lose points there. But most of the time people do a really good job here. The service delivery plan is worth 30 points, and it's going, the very first thing is addressing these 4 components and the 8 eligibility requirements. Well, I'm going to talk about this more in detail in a couple of other slides. But I do want to talk about the fact that it does say, in addition to those 4 components and the eligibility, that you guys should talk about how you incorporate positive youth development, trauma-informed care, and evidence-based programs into this. And this is not just, we use positive youth development in the delivery of our services. That does not demonstrate PYD. Or we use evidence-based, we have a strong evidence-based, and we train staff. That still does not demonstrate trauma-informed care or PYD. So it is, things like you do the youth evaluations, you get input from the kids, you look at those evaluations, and if they indicate that a site wasn't responsive or they didn't feel respected, then you visit with that site and you talk about that. That kids, when you do presentations, kids say that the libraries should be safe place sites. And so you go recruit the libraries based upon that. Maybe you have a youth advisory board or group within your county, and you run outreach ideas by the advisory board. That would be positive youth development. So positive youth development is about giving kids voice. So you talk about how you give kids voice, and it is also about giving kids meaningful roles, meaningful ways to contribute. So that could be that youth advisory group contributing to your outreach strategies, maybe have your materials, maybe they even do presentations for you for younger groups. Maybe they do site checks for you. All of this stuff is giving youth meaningful roles. So they're going to be looking for those 2 things: voice and meaningful roles, ways that they can make meaningful contributions. That is positive youth development. Trauma-informed care is really individualized assessment and then services, right? And so you can tie the TIC and the evidence-based assessment stuff together. So let's say you're using CANS, or you're using the Ansel-Casey. I don't even think that they call it Ansel-Casey anymore, but you're using some of those assessments that are and then based on that assessment data, you are making referrals because you've identified a need for that young person. That's positive youth development. Right? It is, if you have a host home program, it's matching your kids with families that they would fit, that best fit. That's trauma informed as well. So it's that individualized service. Most of you guys do this. Just explain it better. Explain it as if the reviewer knows nothing about TIC, trauma informed care, or what your agency does, or the Safe Place program. Evidence-based practices, things that are really, again, kind of the Ansel-Casey assessment. CANS is evidence-based. I know some of you use it, but not everyone does. Motivational interviewing is evidence-based. If you refer to things like, the ART, which is anger replacement therapy, or you do family-centered, strengthening families, with, all that kind of stuff, mention those. Okay. I know that Safe Place, so for the Safe Place program specifically, motivational interviewing and the assessments are where we're going to find the evidence-based pieces. Because it's really your agency that's doing the rest of that service delivery, but it wouldn't hurt to mention that. Okay. And that's, and it's helping them understand what you're doing that is around PYD, trauma-informed care, or, explaining those evidence-based, not just that we have them, tell them what they are, because they will ask me, Robin, this program said that they, used XYZ, and they don't, maybe they don't know. And they'll ask me, is it evidence-based? And I say yes or no. So, just do that. And the evaluation plan, and this is also a place where people lose, points if they're losing it in the service narrative. And I don't talk about that more in detail. If I don't, then I'm gonna pull that up. This is really looking at those, it's really the using the reports, looking at the reports. It's not enough to put the data in, but you're running those reports, you're looking at them, and you're making adjustments to your program based on the results. If kids consistently say that they have a hard time finding a safe place in a specific area, then you're going out and you're recruiting safe place sites in that area. Or if they consistently say this McDonald's staff never know what to do, you're going out and you're doing training for that, McDonald's site. So it's not only collecting the data, but it's using the data to improve your program. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for ways that you're using the program, you're using the data to improve your program. Okay. So as I mentioned, you guys, a service delivery plan, oh, look, it was A, which was the 4 components. We're going to talk about this stuff in detail and what is new here and the program evaluation. So this is this whole piece of the 4 core components. And Sheila, I think this is probably where you would put your stuff in here. New and innovative strategies for implementation. All right. So your provider narrative, that part talked about outreach strategies, but this is going to talk about other things that you did. So maybe you got innovative with, site recruitment, or you had to get innovative with crisis intervention because, it's like the shelters had all kinds of, and host homes had all kinds of concerns around taking kids during COVID. So this would be where you would put some of that stuff. All right, so that's the new piece. You are going to talk about in detail those 8 eligibility requirements. It's 8 points. So make sure that you mention every one of those, even if it's to say this can be found in the crisis intervention portion of the component, whatever, but make sure you mention them. All right. So these eligibility requirements, you guys have talked about this, usually do a really good job explaining it. These last 4 are the pieces where you lose points. Where if you're losing points because you're not talking about confidentiality. You're not explaining how the staff are trained. You're not referring to that matched fund. And all you have to do is say, see the budget. As long as it's demonstrated there, that's all you have to do. And then the data collection, which you could, again, refer back to the evaluation plan. But mention them specifically, even if you're just referring them back to something else. That just makes it easier for the reviewers. All right, the budget overview. You guys get a budget template. If you need this in Word so that you can modify it, let me know. I will send it to you in Word so that you can actually type that in there. It's on PDF I thought I sent it out in Word, but maybe I didn't when I sent it to everyone, but I can get that to you in Word. You'll definitely need it for the logic model anyway. Use the template. It just makes it easier. Why would you recreate something? You can add lines to it. Just don't take anything away, and we'll look at what that budget template is. But use the template. You're going to talk about allowable costs. For most of you guys, that's not an issue. It's such a small amount of money. If it's, most of the time it is staff time and materials. Those are allowable costs. Typically, that's where you're spending this money. But it's really, really important to demonstrate this match. And I'm going to pull, do I have the budget up? Oh, shoot, I don't. Okay, I don't want to do this then. Let me, oh, dang it. That's not what I want to do. Okay, I want to pull up the RFP so that you guys see this budget. Did did it stop sharing? Or is it still sharing?
It stopped.
Okay, so let me pull this back up. I'm gonna go back to desktop. Okay. So now you guys see this? Okay, so I want to show you that the date does say the 22nd. I made that correction. All right, let me find the budget here. Budget template. Yeah, passed it. There it is. All right. So this is the budget template. I tell the reviewers that the individual line items do not have to, like, you know, if you're putting all, let's just say you're putting all of your funds here, you know, or maybe you're putting all of your funds in outreach and you're not spending any of your agency money in outreach. It's not that the individual lines have to be 100% match. It's that the total program cost has to be 100% match or more. So if you're spending, you know, say you get $7,000, you have to show that your agency is spending money outside of the Safe Place Fund that is $7,000 or more. And if you use this template, it's going to be really easy for them to see this. All right, so it's just this total program cost down here that has to be the 100% match, not the individual lines. And I do say that to the reviewers. And if I have seen that they didn't score that correctly, I will send it back to them and ask them to change that as well. I have started looking, just because sometimes they make errors and that could adversely affect your score, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, so use this template. If I send it in Word, you can modify it, and then you just know that everything is there. Again, you can add lines, just don't take anything away. Okay, and I'll tell them that as well. Go back here. All right. All right, is this back up? PowerPoint's back up? Okay, all right. Your budget justification narrative is just talking about how you spend the money, that you're not, you know, spending money on any of the unallowable things. I always get asked this question, so I say it, there is no request ceiling. So you could ask for $25,000, you won't get $25,000, and the reviewers will think, they know they're not getting $25,000. That is an unrealistic expectation, and then you'll probably get dinged somewhere. So you know what the average is, ask for the highest. That would be my recommendation, is when you put your budget together, put it together for that cap of the average, which is $7,500. That is realistic. And then you're going to get all of those points for the reasonable and allowable costs. Plus, if you ask for $2,500, you have to show that your agency is spending $2,500. And I don't know any agency that spends $50,000 on Safe Place. So that's just, that would be unrealistic anyway. You only have to do a one-year budget. Just know that that's going to apply for both years of the funding. So you can do that 1 year, you know, that's fine. Do it for the annual year. Again, if you did it for like the 2 years and you're asking for 14, they might say, oh, that's too much, and not take into account, because it says on the actual direction, this is a 1 year budget. So make sure you're using that 1 year total. All right, the logic model. And what I noticed, and I'll go back and check, is that maybe you guys didn't have the outcomes in the logic model with the outcomes already there, which normally we put in there. So if that is the case, I will make sure that that gets added to the website, and I will send this out as well. Because typically what we do with the logic model, we have outcomes. The outcomes are already established. That's part of that state process, your program review, progress review. So they're there. You just work backwards. That's all you do. You work backwards on that logic model. If people lose points on the logic model, it's always, the comment always from the reviewer is there was no clear linkage. They didn't understand how what you put in the logic model was going to result in, increased outreach or site maintenance. So just make sure that they understand how what you're doing links to whichever outcome it is. All right. Use the outcomes that are identified. You guys will have that. Don't change it. Don't change it. I don't think people do anymore. The first couple of times people were changing the outcomes and they lost points for it. I don't think people do that anymore. Don't change the outcomes. You'll get dinged for it. All right. So again, this is just the outline of the timeline. And I will open it up for questions. Here is my email address as well as my phone number. I will say that if you call me and I don't have your phone number and contact number saved in my phone, it will go straight to voicemail. Leave me a message, I'll call you back. It's just I don't know. I set something on my phone that made it do that, and I haven't been able to figure out how to take it off. So if it goes straight to voicemail, leave me a message. I will call you back. You can also text me and just say, hey, this is such and such, so that I know who it is, if you're not in my phone already. And then this is the website. It is under the current news, I think, and you might have to wait for it to scroll, but it is there. So you scroll down to find the current news or whatever that title is, and then the current news scrolls and wait. But the Safe Place RFP is there. I checked it yesterday, or I checked it sometime this week, and then noticed the typo and sent him the correction. So hopefully that is up on the website too. All right. So questions, you guys can unmute yourselves and ask questions. You can type it into the chat feature. Now would be a really good time to ask those questions if you have it. As I said when we started, this is being recorded, and I will make this link available probably on the website, but I can also send it out to folks. So there are some folks on here that I'm not sure, like most people I recognize. So there are a couple folks that I'm not sure where you're from. If you think that might be the case, then at least say, hey, Robin, this is so-and-so from this agency about a new program in this county. And then I know, and I can have that. So some of you may not get, if I send this stuff out, may not get it. That's just because I don't have your contact information. So you'll want to make sure to email me so that I have it and you get added to that list. Any questions? All right, I see one in the chat feature. Let me pull the chat up. Okay, so if you are a fairly new program, and like new as in you haven't been launched for more than a year, and that year has been during the COVID pandemic, then a lot of this stuff is, I'm not going to ding you for, not having, like, first of all, you don't do site. If you're less than a year old, then you won't have any site checks to do, because you only do that after, every year after it's been a year. And so, you're gonna, you'll get the points for that, because everybody should have everything. Yeah, you're going to get the same credit for the outreach that everybody else is getting because you launched during COVID, which I would talk about that because that's a pretty big accomplishment. People know that. So yeah, if you have other, again, if you guys have, let's say you start this or you're looking through it, and I would strongly suggest that you read through this, at least skim through this initially before Friday, so that if you have questions, you get those questions directly to me for our FAQs, which will be posted a week later.
Hey, Robin, it's Vanessa. I'm so sorry. I had to step out real quick to deal with shelter stuff. Are we asking any questions right now or just submit those for Friday?
No, you can ask them now and also submit them because if you submit them, then they'll get added to the FAQ document.
Okay. Well, I was just curious, when you're talking about the matching funds, are you asking that we match what our new award amount would be, and how would we know? Or are you asking that we match at least what we received the last 2-year cycle?
That you match what you're asking for in the proposal.
Okay. Okay.
And for you guys who are, who've had this funding before, I mean, what you got the last time, or maybe you have a new grant writer and you anticipate getting, I would just, honestly, I would just ask for the cap, which is $7,500, and go from there. Because you all are spending way more than $7,500 on the Safe Place program. So that match is going to be easy.
Hey, Robin.
Yes.
I had a question about the kids count data. So Fort Wayne Amy brought this to my attention. She said Fort Wayne was listed as one of like the top 3 cities to live in. And so I don't know how relevant, or like we've been using the same number that we've had for probably the last 4 years for our outreach goals. And I think I just had a question on like if the relevancy, I mean, should I be checking that every year? Because I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. And, we agreed on the goals. So I don't know if that'll change or. Yeah.
If it matches the, so for the new programs, and you guys will have to remind me if I don't do this, because I've said I'm going to do a lot of stuff. But for the new, for the current programs, if you guys I have all of those outreach numbers. I can just send that out to all of the current Safe Place coordinators. And then you have those numbers and you can just make sure that it's, because every year you send that to NSP, a lot of times it doesn't change. Or your outreach goal is higher than that 25% and it still fits. So I'll just send that out. And then you can double check. All right. Well, you guys sit with this a little bit, look at that RFP, get me your questions if you have them for that frequently asked questions document. I'm going to pull up the one from 2 years ago, and we'll just add to that as I need to. And I'll get you the Word copy. I will get you the logic model, and I'm going to get you your outreach goals. Was there something else?
Hey, Robin, I have one more quick question.
Sure.
Will you be able to answer general questions after Friday, or is Friday the deadline and then we're on our own?
I answer general. I do answer general. It's like we have this because that's just kind of the DCS process. But if it's a general question, then I just add it. And typically what I'll do is I add it to the FAQ and I update the FAQ on the website so that everybody has it. So you may not get a specific, so if you, let's say, Steve, you ask a question, I'm not going to answer you directly. I'm going to add it to the FAQ, and then I'm going to refer you back to that FAQ. So it would not be a bad idea for you guys to kind of check that frequently.
I think the only other thing I think I needed was the budget template
It is in the RFP.
in a Word document, sorry.
Yeah, if I send the RFP as a Word document, you will get it that way. So the RFP in Word, the logic model, and your goals. All right. Well, thank you guys for spending your Wednesday morning with me. Hopefully this was helpful. When I end this, it will convert and I will get it on the website as well. So I think just to we have to kind of be all inclusive. So rather than just send it out to you guys who are on it, I'm just gonna put it on the website. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm gonna say too, if you guys are still on, if you do need a request for, like, if you need your scores, that kind of stuff, send that to me directly as a request. All right. Have a good one.